Tattva Pradipika. Tattva Pradipika. There is a text that has waited many centuries to be heard rather than merely studied. It comes from 13th century India, attributed to a philosopher known as Chitsukha or Chitsukha. We cannot say with certainty when he was born or trace his lineage with confidence. The historical record is thin. What we can say is that he wrote in a moment of genuine crisis, when the living recognition at the heart of Advaita Vedanta, the teaching of non-dual awareness, had grown stiff inside centuries of commentary and needed a sharper instrument to free it. The text he produced is called the Tattva Pradipika, which means simply the light of truth. It is not a devotional poem. It is closer to a precise philosophical demonstration, a series of careful arguments designed to cut away every false account of what you are, until only the obvious and inescapable remains. With that, we turn to the Pradipika itself. Phase 1. The light without a shadow. The skeptic asks, "You say the self is self-luminous. What does that mean? If I know a jar, the jar is illuminated by my mind. If I know my mind, is there a second mind to illuminate it? We cannot have an infinite chain of flashlights. Therefore, the self must either be unknown or it must be an object like any other." Chitsukha responds, "You are suffering from a category confusion. The self is not a thing that requires a light. The self is the luminosity itself." Self-luminosity is the capability of being immediately experienced while remaining non-objective. The self can never be turned into a this. It can never be placed on a table and examined by a subject. It is the absolute subject, and yet, despite not being an object, it is not hidden or remote. It is the most direct fact of your existence. It is the presence that is never absent. Why must the self be self-luminous? Consider the act of knowing. The jar is known. It is a dark object that needs the mind to reveal it. The mind is known. It is a movement that needs awareness to reveal it. If awareness also needed to be known, we would fall into infinite regress. At some point, there must be a foundational light that does not cast a shadow. This light does not need to be seen to exist. Just as the sun does not need a flashlight to prove it is noon, awareness does not need a thought to prove it is awake. Its being and its shining are the same event. The opponent says, "The mind is like a lamp. It reveals itself while revealing the object." Chitsukha replies, "A lamp does not reveal itself. The lamp is a physical object seen by an eye. The lamp's light and the lamp's body are seen together by a subject standing apart from both. The mind cannot be self-knowing because the mind is a series of changing parts. A part cannot witness the whole. Only the unchanging witness can be self-luminous." If the self were an object, it would be material and temporary. If the self were unknown, it would be a myth. By defining the self as immediate yet non-objective, the sovereignty of awareness is secured. You are the light that makes objects possible, but you are forever free from being objectified. You are the unseen seer. Stop trying to see yourself. You cannot see it for the same reason the eye cannot see itself. Instead, realize that you are the seeing. The light is already on. Phase 2. The execution of the known. The logician argues, "You say the self is real, but to be real, it must be knowable. If I can know a jar, I can surely know my own self, as an object of internal perception. If the self is not a known entity, then it is as useless as the horns of a rabbit. Chitsukha responds, "You are trying to turn the eye around to look at itself. Objecthood is the signature of the non-self. Anything that can be known as a this is by definition external, limited, and insentient. To claim the self is an object is to pronounce it dead." Why can the self never be an object of knowledge? If the self is known by another knowledge, then that second knowledge is the seer and the self is the seen. But who sees the second knowledge? If it is known by a third, we have a never-ending chain. To avoid this logical spiral, we must admit that there is a final seer who is never seen. The self is the substratum of knowing, not the content of knowing. Just as fire burns wood, but cannot burn itself, awareness illuminates the world, but cannot be turned into a world object. The opponent argues, the self is like a finger that can touch its own tip, or a lamp that shows itself. Chitsukha replies, this is impossible. The same entity cannot be both the agent and the object of the same action at the same time. A knife can cut many things, but it cannot cut its own edge. A dancer can perform on many stages, but he cannot climb onto his own shoulders. If the self were the object of its own knowing, it would have to be split in two, but the self is unbroken. Knowing the self is not an act performed by the eye upon the eye. It is the simple recognition of the light that was always there. What happens to a thing when it becomes known? It acquires three stains. It becomes insentient, merely matter. It becomes finite, it has a border. It becomes mortal, it has a beginning and an end. If you insist on knowing the self as an object, you are attributing these stains to the infinite. You are turning the king into a stone. The known has been set aside. The self remains not as an object of wisdom, but as wisdom itself. Do not look for the self in your thoughts, your visions, or your feelings. Those are all known things, they are the seen. Look at the looking. The presence that is aware of the thought, that is the unknowable knower. It does not need to be proven. It is the one who accepts or rejects the proof. Phase 3. The Persistent King. The Buddhist opponent argues, why do you invent a permanent self? Reality is movement. Consciousness is like a stream of water or a series of sparks. Each thought rises and dies in a microsecond. Because the sequence is so fast, you hallucinate a permanent me. In truth, there is only a flicker. Chitsukha responds, you are describing the smoke, but you have forgotten the fire. Movement can only be perceived by something that is still. A series of flashes can never produce the experience of a world. To have a stream, you must have a riverbed. Chitsukha asks the skeptic, how do you know that the eye who saw the sun yesterday is the same eye who sees it today? The object was seen yesterday by one subject, and it is seen today by another. If these are different flashes that die instantly, the second cannot remember what the first saw. One person cannot remember the experience of another. The fact that you say, I am seeing again what I saw before, is the clinical proof of self-identity. There is a single, unblinking eye that spans the gap of time. The thoughts are the beads, but the self is the golden thread that remains hidden while it holds the jewelry together. The opponent tries to save the theory. The stream itself holds the memory. Each flash passes its information to the next, like a relay race. Chitsukha replies, a stream is just a name we give to a collection of parts. If the information is passed, who witnesses the transfer? If one flash dies before the next is born, there is a void between them. Who bridges the void? An infinite number of dead flashes can never add up to one living awareness. Awareness must be simultaneous with the past and the present in order to compare them. Therefore, awareness is not in time. Time is in awareness. Imagine a cinema screen. The movie is a series of flickering images, explosions, dances, and deaths. Does the screen explode? Number, does the screen dance? Number, does the screen die? No, the movie is only visible because the screen stays still. You are that screen. The flickering mind is the movie. The self is uncontradicted by the three periods of time: past, present, and future. Stop identifying with the flash of the thought. The anger is a flash. The joy is a flash. The person you think you are is a series of flashes. Look at the stillness that allows the flashes to be seen. You are the king who survives the night. Phase 4. The anatomy of sight. The logician defines perception as knowledge born of the contact between the sense organ and the object. He believes that the eyes are like fingers that reach out and touch the world, bringing back a report of real objects. Chitsukha responds, "You are describing a biological event, not a cognitive truth. How can a material eye produce a luminous thought? If perception is mere contact, why do you not see the dust on your own cornea as clearly as you see the stars?" We must move from the myth of touching to the logic of unveiling. How does the internal awareness reach the external jar? Awareness is like molten light. The mind is the canal. When the eye opens, the mind flows out and envelops the object. It does not merely see the shape, it takes the shape. Perception is the moment when the light inside the body and the light inside the object become identically located. You do not see the object over there. You see the object where your mind has become it. Perceptuality is the non-difference of the subjective consciousness from the objective consciousness. The object has a foundation of existence awareness. The subject has the same foundation. Ordinarily, the veil of ignorance makes them appear as two separate entities. The mind wave acts as a solvent that temporarily dissolves the veil at a specific coordinate. For the duration of the seeing, the wall between the I and the this is dissolved. Perception is not a report sent from enemy territory. It is a reunification of the light. The eye is not the cause of the light. It is the gateway for the mind to reach the object. Just as a man needs a window to see the sky, the mind needs the sense organ to reach the object. But the window does not create the sky. If the eye were the actual cause of knowledge, then knowledge would be as blind and material as the eye itself. Knowledge is the property of the witness. The eye is merely the plumbing. Seeing is not contact, but the removal of the barrier. Objects are not known, they are enveloped by the subject. Perception is the micro-rehearsal of total oneness. When you look at the world, realize you are not a point looking at a sphere. You are the vastness momentarily identifying with a form. Phase 5. The logic of the ghost. The dualist challenges, you say the world is false, but false usually means a total non-entity, like a square circle. If the world were that kind of false, I could not walk on the earth or drink the water. Since the world is useful and perceived, it must be real. Your philosophy is a flight from the obvious. Chitsukha responds, you are trapped in a binary delusion. You believe that if a thing is not eternal steel, it must be total void. We identify a third state, the mithya, the ghost. We shall provide the careful definition of falsity that accounts for both the world's appearance and its ultimate non-existence. Falsity is being the counterpositive of absolute negation in the very locus where the thing appears. Look at the snake in the rope. The snake is seen, the fear is real. The snake appears on the rope. When the lamp is brought, you realize the snake is not there now, was not there before, and will never be there. The snake is false because it is totally absent at the very coordinate where it is vividly perceived. The world is that snake. It appears in Brahman. It uses Brahman's isness to look solid, but in all three periods of time, Brahman remains as untouched as the rope. The skeptic asks, if it is not real and not unreal, what is it? Chitsukha replies, it is indescribable. It is not real, for it is cancelled by knowledge. It is not unreal, for it is currently appearing to the senses. This is the logic of the mirage. The water in a mirage is not nothing. If it were nothing, you would not see the shimmer. But it is not water. If it were water, you could drink it. The world is a luminous blur that possesses functional reality, but lacks essential substance. How does knowledge cancel the world? Knowledge does not act as a hammer to break an object. It is a cognitive solvent. When you realize the rope is a rope, the snake does not die and leave a corpse. The snake's substance simply dissolves into the ignorance that gave it birth. Negation is the realization that the other never actually occurred. Stop trying to improve the world. You cannot fix a mirage to make it more wet. Stop trying to save the ego. You cannot heal a shadow's wound. The world's inability to be defined is the proof of your freedom. If the world were real, you would be a prisoner forever. Because the world is a ghost, you are already the king. Phase 6. The murder of difference. The dualist attempts to repair the world. You may have called the world a ghost, but even ghosts are many. I see a jar and I see a cloth. They are different. This difference is an objective fact. If there were no difference, I would try to pour water into the cloth and wear the jar. Since the world is ordered by distinction, duality is the truth. Chitsukha responds, you are mistaking a processing error for a substantial fact. You assume the wall exists because you have never put it under examination. What is this difference? Is it the thing itself, or is it something the thing has? If the wall cannot be defined, your ordered world is just a linguistic stutter. The opponent argues, difference is the very essence of the thing. To see the jar is to see its difference from the cloth. Chitsukha applies the logic. If difference is the very nature of the jar, then jar and difference are synonyms. If they are synonyms, then when you hear the word jar, you should simultaneously know every single thing in the universe that is not a jar. To know that it is different from B, the mind must hold B as a reference. If difference is the nature of A, then A cannot be known until the entire universe, everything that is not A, is known. Since you do not need to be omniscient to perceive a pot, difference cannot be its essence. The opponent retreats. Difference is not the essence, but a property that the object possesses, like its color. Chitsukha asks, is this difference itself different from the jar? If it is the same, we return to the first failure. If it is different, you need a second difference to separate the first difference from the jar. Then you will need a third difference to separate the second from the first. This is infinite regress. Your intellect is generating a never-ending chain of ghostly differences just to keep one pot separate from one cloth. A theory that never touches the floor is not a truth. It is a disease. The logician offers a technical definition. Difference is simply mutual absence. The jar is the absence of clothness, and the cloth is the absence of jarness. Chitsukha replies, this is circular. To define the absence of cloth, you must first know the cloth. To define the cloth, you must know its difference from the jar. You are trying to build two towers by leaning them against each other in midair. If you do not know the objects independently, you cannot know their absence. If you use the absence to define the objects, you have explained nothing. The walls have dissolved. Separation is a linguistic glitch projected onto a single, unbroken field of light. The dualist is a man who draws lines on the surface of the ocean and then fears that the water on the left will drown the water on the right. The sage is the one who realizes that the line is made of thought, and the water is the only substance. There is no jar and no cloth in the absolute. There is only the unfragmented mass of being. Phase 7. The vacuum of absence. The logician attempts to save his world of parts. You have dissolved difference, but you cannot deny absence. When I smash a jar, its absence begins. When I look at a table without a book, I perceive the non-existence of the book. Absence is a real category. If the world can be absent, then your one is not the only truth. Chitsukha responds, you are trying to weigh a shadow. What is this absence apart from the ground you see? You believe nothing is a thing you perceive. We shall prove that absence is a linguistic fiction used to describe a locus without a label. The opponent defines two types of absence. Prior absence, the non-existence of the pot before it is made. Posterior absence, the non-existence of the pot after it is smashed. Chitsukha asks, does this absence have a beginning or an end? If prior absence is real, how can it end when the pot is made? A real nothing cannot be destroyed by a something. If posterior absence is real, how can a hammer, a physical thing, produce a nothing? Before and after are properties of the form, not of the substance. Absence is just a name you give to the clay when it is not in the shape of a jar. There is no nothing in the universe. There is only the substratum changing its mask. The opponent argues, the jar is the absence of the cloth. This mutual absence is what keeps the world distinct. Chitsukha applies the logic. If the jar is the absence of the cloth, then when you see the jar, you are seeing a nothing. But you see a something, a solid, functional shape. If the absence sits on the jar, you need a relation to connect the nothing to the something. And we have already shown that relations are phantoms. Mutual absence is merely a linguistic negation. It is a thought wave that says no to one form while looking at another. The gap between the two is not a vacuum. It is the unbroken awareness that allows both forms to be compared. The opponent retreats. Absolute absence is that which never was and never will be, like the coldness of fire. Chitsukha replies, if it never was and never will be, it is a non-entity, like a square circle. A non-entity cannot be a category of knowledge, for there is nothing to know. By including absolute absence in your list of real things, you are admitting that your real world includes things that do not exist. The self can never be absent. You can doubt the jar, the cloth, and the world, but you cannot doubt the one who doubts. The self is the ever-present ground upon which the ideas of presence and absence play. The dark was only the sun momentarily ignored. Phase 8. The syntax of the infinite. The skeptic argues, words can only give indirect knowledge. If I say there is an apple in the next room, you know about the apple, but you do not see it. To see it, you must walk there and use your eyes. Therefore, the Vedas can tell us about Brahman, but only meditation can show us Brahman. The word is a map. It is not the territory. Chitsukha responds, you are treating the self as if it were an apple, a remote object in another room. We identify a unique class of knowledge. When the object is already immediate and the only obstacle is a cognitive error, then the right word does not merely describe the truth. It is the vision. 10 men cross a flooded river. On the other side, they count themselves to see if everyone survived. The leader counts the 9 others but forgets to count himself. He weeps, crying, the 10th man is dead. His grief is real. His knowledge of the death is vivid. A passerby sees the error and shouts, you are the 10th man. The leader does not meditate on being the 10th man. He does not infer it. The moment the word hits his ear, he directly experiences his own existence as the 10th. The word produced immediate vision because the object himself was already present. Why can the sentence that thou art grant liberation instantly? Remote objects require a journey or a sense organ because they are distant in space or time. The self is never distant. It is the very foundation of the one hearing the sentence. The distance between you and Brahman is a linguistic hallucination. You think you are apart because you have been labeled apart. The great sentence is the counter-label. It is a linguistic instrument that targets the specific thought wave of smallness and incinerates it. When the small thought dies, the infinite reality, which was always there, simply shines forth. The opponent argues, but most people hear the sentence and stay bound. They must practice to make it real. Chitsukha replies, the delay is not in the word, the delay is in the dirt on the mirror. If the mind is full of doubt or old habits, the word cannot do its work. But for the right mind, the mind that is clean and focused, the word is sufficient. To say that action or meditation is the final cause of liberation is to admit that Brahman is a product, but Brahman is a fact. A fact is revealed by light, not by labor. Language can produce direct experience when the subject is the object. Awakening is an event of understanding, not a process of time. Stop waiting for a mystical flash in the future. Listen to the logic of identity. If you understand the sentence, I am the infinite, and your mind is free of doubt, you are free. The search ends in the hearing. Phase 9. The anatomy of the veil. The skeptic argues, you say ignorance causes the world, but ignorance is just not knowing. It is an absence, like the absence of a jar. How can a mere nothing act as a wall? How can a vacuum project the stars and the mountains? Your veil is a poetic myth with no logical substance. Chitsukha responds, you are misdiagnosing the darkness. Ignorance is not a lack of light. It is a positive obstruction. It is a functional something that possesses the power to hide and the power to distort. When you wake from a dreamless sleep, you say, I slept happily, I knew nothing. This is a memory of a state. Memory requires a previous direct experience. You cannot experience a total void, for a void offers nothing to consciousness. Therefore, in sleep, you are witnessing a positive enclosure, a dark, silent, beginningless substance that was veiling your true nature. Ignorance is not a no, it is a cloud. Just as a cloud is a something that hides the sun, ignorance is a something that hides the self. Chitsukha dissects the two powers of the veil. The first is the concealing power. This is the blindfold. It does not destroy the light. It simply makes the infinite appear as if it is not there. It creates the sensation of I do not know. The second is the projecting power. Once the truth is hidden, this power goes to work. It is the dream architect. It takes the unmoving light and vibrates it into the forms of the world. The world is a transformation of ignorance. It is a parasitic growth. It uses the isness of the self as its skeleton and the stuff of ignorance as its flesh. The skeptic asks, where does this ignorance live? If it lives in the self, then the self is not pure. If it lives in the mind is its own product. Chitsukha replies, ignorance lives in pure consciousness, but it affects only the reflection. It is like a cataract in the eye. The cataract is supported by the eye. The cataract depends on the eye's light, yet the cataract prevents the eye from seeing the world clearly. The light of awareness is the locus of the veil, but because awareness is the absolute subject, it is never stained by the darkness it supports. The sun is the locus of the cloud, but the sun is never wet. Ignorance is a positive power, not a mere lack. It is indescribable, for it vanishes under examination. It is removable by a single flash of truth. Stop trying to educate the ego. Education is just adding more labels to the veil. Realize that the I do not know is a substance you are witnessing, not a fact of your being. You are the witness of the darkness. The moment you identify as the witness, the veil loses its density. Phase 10. The ruler of the dream. The skeptic asks, if the world is a projection of ignorance, why is it so orderly? Why does the sun rise with precision? And why do actions lead to specific results? Ignorance is dull. It cannot plan. If there is no all-knowing intelligence behind it, the universe should be a chaotic explosion of random data. Chitsukha responds, you are looking for a clockmaker outside the clock. We identify the Lord not as a separate person, but as the consciousness of the totality. Within the dream of duality, the presence of an omniscient ruler is a logical necessity. The world is full of varied experiences, joy, pain, birth, and death. These are the results of past actions, but action is insentient. A good deed cannot know when it is time to reward the doer. The seeds of karma are like dead letters in a post office. There must be an omniscient postmaster who knows the history of every soul and delivers the results of action with mathematical precision. This intelligence is the Lord. He is the efficient cause who turns the raw stuff of ignorance into a structured universe of law. Chitsukha draws the line between the individual self and the Lord. The individual is the slave of the veil. He is wrapped in ignorance and believes he is small, limited, and suffering. He is a character caught in the movie. The Lord is the master of the veil. He wears the total shadow as his garment. He projects the movie. He knows it is a movie, and he is never fooled by the shadows on the screen. The Lord is Brahman associated with the power of projection. He is the magician. Just as a magician creates an illusion of a tiger, but is not frightened by it, the Lord creates the universe, but remains the infinite peace, even while he rules the storm. How can the Lord know everything if everything is false? The Lord's knowledge is not learned. It is not a series of thoughts. His omniscience is the direct illumination of all latent impressions. He is the global consciousness that witnesses every thought wave in every mind simultaneously. He does not think about the world. The world is a vibration within his own being. His will is the natural law of the elements. His justice is the unmoving gravity of truth. Within the dream, a cosmic intelligence is a technical requirement. The Lord is the subjective master of the objective world. His lordship is a functional role, not a change in the substratum. Stop fearing fate as a blind, cruel force. Fate is the intelligence of the Lord. The ruler and the witness are the same sun reflecting in different-sized jars. Phase 11. The momentum of the shadow. The skeptic launches a final strike. You say knowledge incinerates ignorance, but ignorance is the material cause of the body. Therefore, the moment a man says I am Brahman and knows it, his body should turn to ash and vanish. If your sage is still breathing, eating and walking, he is either a liar or your philosophy is a failure. There can be no such thing as a living free man. Chitsukha responds, you are confusing the destruction of the cause with the exhaustion of the momentum. Potter uses a stick to spin his wheel. The stick is the active cause, ignorance, desire. The potter removes the stick, knowledge arrives. Does the wheel stop instantly? No. The wheel continues to spin because of the momentum generated before the stick was removed. The body is that wheel. The stick of ignorance has been pulled away by the flash of truth. The wheel continues to spin, the heart beats, the eyes see, not because there is new fuel, but because the old force has not yet reached zero. The sage is not doing life. He is witnessing the spin of a machine he has already disowned. The skeptic asks, but how can he see the world if he knows it is false? Consider a man who suffers from a double vision defect. He knows with certainty that there is only one moon. Does his knowledge make the second moon vanish from his sight? Does the sight of the second moon make him believe there are two? No. This is the state of the sage. He sees the world appearance, but he has cancelled the reality of it. It is a sublated appearance. He sees the snake on the floor, but he treats it as a rope. He sees the other, but he knows it is his own self. The shadow persists for the senses, but the certainty is anchored in the sun. Why does the momentum vary? Why do some sages live long and others die young? The life of the sage is an arrow in flight. Past deeds are the granary of arrows, knowledge burns this. Future deeds are new arrows, knowledge prevents these. The current life is the arrow already shot from the bow. Once the arrow has left the bow, it cannot be called back. It must hit the target and exhaust its kinetic energy. The sage is the stationary sky. The arrow of the body flies through the sky. The sky does not move with the arrow. The sky does not feel the impact. The sky simply allows the flight. The body persists as an unfettered echo of past momentum. Perception continues as a harmless optical trick. Freedom is a state of internal sovereignty, not physical disappearance. Stop trying to make the body enlightened. The body is a machine made of grain and shadow. It will always be heavy and limited. Realize that you are the space in which the body is happening. Phase 12. The Sovereign Verdict. The expedition is reaching its end. We stand at the peak and look back at the trail of dissolved illusions. The light has been proven to be self-luminous. The seer has been rescued from being an object. Difference has been shown to be a logical glitch. Ignorance has been mapped as a removable cloud. Living freedom has been secured as a fact. The many has been liquidated. The other is dead. The laboratory of the mind is now empty of objects, leaving only the substratum. The dualist attempts a final sabotage. If Brahman is beyond words and mind, then it is unknown, and an unknown truth is as good as a lie. Chitsukha applies the logic to the word unknown. A thing is unknown if it is an object that has not yet been lit by a lamp, but Brahman is the lamp itself. Brahman is not unknown. He is unknowable as an object precisely because he is the subject of all knowing. You do not need to find the truth because you are the presence that makes finding and losing possible. The king does not need to search for his kingdom. He is the ground of it. The Tattva Pradipika has done its work. It has used logic to dissolve the logic of the many. It has used definitions to break open the cages of words. And now even this knowledge, these 12 phases of argument and counter-argument, is, in a sense, part of the shadow world it has been dismantling. Like a medicinal herb that leaves the body after curing the fever, Chitsukha's argument now falls silent. The reasoning is set down because the purpose of the reasoning is complete. What remains is the self-luminous residue. It is worth pausing here, as we close, to notice something about the text we have just moved through. The 12 phases, the scaffolding, the orderly progression from self-luminosity to living freedom, that architecture belongs to this reading, to the way this presentation has chosen to organize and illuminate the Pradipika's arguments for a listening audience. Chitsukha own text does not divide itself this way. It moves as a continuous river of argument, one objection meeting one reply, one position collapsing into the next, without labeled stages or numbered arrivals. The divisions are a modern lantern held over an old path, and a lantern is not the path. The path itself is the unbroken movement of pure inquiry. Duality vaporized, awareness established, sovereignty realized. The king is seated, the silence is absolute. Here ends the Tattva Pradipika, the light of the self.